Welcome to the G20 Interfaith Podcast, a platform where we explore the intersection of faith, global challenges, and policy.
Welcome to another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast. My name is Stuart Bird.
I'm Mariana Richardson.
And today we're delighted to be joined by Daffa Raynanda. Daffa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stuart. Hello, Stuart. Hello, Mariana.
So, Daffa, just to give a little introduction, Daffa is a Southeast Asian narrative strategist working at the intersection of sustainability, communication, and intercivilizational diplomacy. He designs education systems and institutional strategies that connect Southeast Asia's innovation in green transformation. So, my first question for you, Daffa, is to help our listeners understand what it means to be a narrative bridge builder.
Wow, what an introduction, Mariana. Thank you for the question. Thank you for your time, Stuart and Mariana. For the first question, I think what about the narrative. I think in the digital era right now, the globalization, the narratives is the most critical part, the most main part in the today's world, especially between the youth. So I believe this is the first base of the human civilization right now. So by changing the narratives, today's narrative, as we know, today's world, and shifting, the peace is not in everywhere, the wars everywhere. So I believe with the right narratives, we can change the world to the better civilizations.
So you also talk about Southeast Asia's innovation and green transformation. Can you also explain that a little bit better for our listeners too?
Yes. It comes from my perspective when I see the world today. There's a lot of global warming, and there's a lot of climate change. My background, I'm from the Southeast Asia, especially from Indonesia. I'm coming from third world countries that produce a lot of the CO2, and I saw by myself how the climate change is real. And yeah, I believe by seeing what happens in my neighborhood, I want to change the neighborhood and I want to change the world. I coming from the perspective that think globally, act locally. So I trying to act locally in my neighborhood, my communities, and etc. Especially in green transformation, because I believe we need to be more, not only more green as the forest, but also save the oceans. So yeah, this is my base about the green transformation.
I know that Jakarta itself has had major flooding problems and others, and that they've had to change the actual capital city there. Have you experienced some of those problems as well?
Actually, I didn't come from Jakarta. Uh, I'm from the Makassar, my childhood. So it's different island in Indonesia, but yes, Jakarta. I frequently go to the Jakarta, and Jakarta is flooding, and yeah, it's really happening here. The climate change and etc. And the policy it's not changing for many years. So this is I work for the communities for better.
Hmm. I really like what you said. Think globally, act locally. That's a great thing that I'm going to remember, and it's inspiring to see what you're doing. Um, so you are the co-founder and managing director of Teodisi. What is Teodisi's goal?
So yeah, to answer that question, I want to come back from a background where I've been exploring intersection between the ethics, public life, and how societies make sense of the world. So a big part of the journey has been shaped by my interest in the Abrahamic tradition, not just a matter of belief, but as a moral framework that carries ideas about responsibility, justice, and preservation of life. So over time, I became interested in how those values show up in today's world, especially in social dynamics, politics, and sustainability. That's where Teodisi comes in. It's a platform I founded with my several friends to explore social, political, and cultural issues through the Abrahamic lens, not to preach, but to examine reality through the perspective that's often present, but not always articulate through the, like Mariana mentioned, the narratives, through the storytelling. We bring forward to question like, what does justice really demand today? How should power be used? And how do we preserve life? Not just environmentally, but socially as well, right? So far, we've reached more than 4 million engagement across the Southeast Asia because the Southeast Asia have a similar language each other, especially in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, and Singapore. Our language is Bahasa based on Melayu. So yeah, it helped us to grow so well. So yeah, that's big part, big picture of how I uh, founded Theodicy. And yeah, beyond the Theodicy, this journey has connected me with the Abrahamic leaders and communities across the different parts of the world. What I see emerging is shared awareness that we are not just preserving tradition, but actually holding a common moral inheritance. And I think that's where the opportunity is to move from dialogue into something more collective. Teodisi have a lot of digital content. We do also the dialogue, offline dialogue, and etc. So yeah, not erasing the different. We believe we don't want to erasing the difference, but by recognizing that across the Abrahamic world, that there is a shared responsibility to contribute to more just more balance and ultimately more life preserving civilization.
No, I think that is so wonderful, the work that you're doing. And I applaud, especially when we come from an interfaith background, which IF20, of course, does, in terms of bringing these different perspectives together. It's so important, especially when we talk about the Abrahamic world and the focus and values that you're discussing in Teodisi. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I know that in 2022, you served in T20's policy task force, and we would love to hear a little bit more about that and specifically some positive impacts that you saw in the G20 process, since IF20 is also involved in that G20 process as well.
Okay, yeah. Well, it makes me to flashback to 2022. Yes, in 2022, I was involved in T20 or Think 20. It's a bank data of G20. I'm working on digital governance, cybersecurity, and inclusive connectivity. Yeah, inclusive connectivity. I work as policy researcher there. And one thing that stood out to me is that G20 creates a rare space where different sectors like government, researcher, and civil societies can actually come into conversation. For example, conversation around digital safety, including how to protect youth or younger online user have been discussed in G20's related forum for quite some times, especially in areas like media literacy and responsible digital ecosystem. And now we are starting to see some of these ideas translate into real policies in different countries, like in Europe, in Indonesia, also want to ratify the one programs that coming from the Europe about the digital safety for the youth. So it shows that this question, while discussion, while something slow, do have a long-term influence on how societies respond to emerging challenges. And on personal level, being part of the process also shaped how I see digitalization, not just a technical issue, but as something deeply connected to question of equity, responsibility, and how we preserve human well-being in digital age. So that's how I more learn about the narrative at that time, like the first question of the Mariana. And I think because we in Interfaith 20, and I think this is the where the faith, especially within the Abrahamic tradition, can play a meaningful role. Because beyond policy and technology, we also dealing with the question about what kind of society we are trying to build. And yeah, I think the G20 process often appreciate uh, one thing that I want to mention that by all the process of G20, I think one thing we need to more elaborate more is the process of G20 operates very high in a elite level. And ideally, the ideas discussed there shouldn't be stay there. If this conversation could actually breathe at the grassroots level, be understood, adapted, and lived by communities, the impact would be much more meaningful. Like all the podcasts I saw in IF20, it gonna be really much meaningful if people in G20's members can also adapt what we are conversation in all this podcast. So yeah, I see the G20 is very important space, not only for coordination, but also a place where ethical and civilizational question can begin to the surface level.
Was there anything specific that you wrote in the policy task force for T20 that you saw that actually, went forward? Was there anything specifically that you saw that actually made a difference?
Yeah, yes, kind of when T20 in 2022 is Indonesia presidency, and I told you that I'm at the digital connectivity areas, and there's a lot of policy connected like in digital infrastructure and something like that, ratified by the members of G20s.
Wonderful.
And I love what you said about the G20 process. What the G20 Interfaith Forum, the IF20, tries to do is every year it makes policy briefs about different policy focus areas. So we wanted to talk about one specific one from 2025 that seems very applicable to you. It's called really what the policy focus area is it's addressing interreligious tensions through education and enhancing understanding of religious matters. And I've seen the benefit of education and enhancing understanding of religious matters to address interreligious tensions. I've seen that personally as I'm currently a university student and I'm in education right now, and I've been able to see um, as me and my classmates have grown our understanding of other religions, it helps grow our love for other religions and our desire to collaborate, and our understanding of what they offer to the world. And so I am grateful that this is a policy area that we are focusing on.
I want to go back to some of the comments that Stuart just made in terms of this concept of interreligious tensions, because you talked specifically about how the Abrahamic religions need to come together, and it needs to be, a positive rather than a problem. And it has been a problem in terms of interreligious issues and tensions. And so I would love your thoughts on how can we improve interreligious tensions that are happening in the world today?
Okay. So yeah, I think one of the biggest causes of the interreligious tension is not religion itself, but how it's experienced today, often at a very surface level. In many contexts, religion is no longer engaged as a space for ethical reflection, but more as an identity marker, something that defines who I am, who you are, and sometimes who I am not. And when it operates at the level, it easily turns into boundaries, not because people believe different things, but because those differences are no longer held within a deeper sense of relationship. I've seen this directly in my work with the youth, the young people in education. Most of them are actually open and curious, but religion is often introduced to them in categories. This is your belief, this is theirs, without enough space to explore why these traditions exist, what question they are trying to answer, and how they relate to our shared human condition. So religion becomes something inherited, but not deeply understood. And when something inherited without understanding, it can be defended by very strongly, but not necessarily reflected upon. I also see a gap between what we might call the essence of religions and its expression. The sense speaks to our relationship with God, truth, and our responsibility, but its expression, shaped by history, language, and institution, naturally differs across communities. So the problem is not the difference, but when we become attached to expression and lost connection to essence, at that point, religion becomes something we defend rather than something that transforms us. So education becomes very critical, not just in the sense of adding knowledge. And I think we often focus on religious literacy, but what's we missing is the understanding, the ability to sit with the difference, to ask question and engage without turning it into the opposition. Without that, even well-intentioned education can unintentionally reinforce the distance. And I think there's also interesting tension here. In many societies that are deeply religious, education, especially for educators, is not always valued in proportion to its importance, which is paradoxical because historically many of earliest centers of learning, like university, were rooted in religious space. When we search history right now, uh, who is the first university, we know that is from the mosque. The second is from the church in Bologna or other traditions. So education was never separate from the religion. It was a part of its core. And I think reconnecting to that important because when education is strengthened, not only in knowledge, but in depth and ethical reflection, it becomes one of the most, how to say, effective ways to reduce interreligious tension. So yeah, at the same times, also about education didn't start in institution like schools, university. It starts from the family. The first place we learn how to see others, we with respect, with fear, or with openness at home. And in many societies today, that space is becoming less consistent in transmitting values like patience, responsibility, and how to deal with the difference. There's a lot, maybe in generation like me or generation like Stuart, there's a lot of fatherless child, motherless child that makes the foundation is weak and it becomes much harder, I think, to engage in a different grounded while later in life. So yeah, I think that's perspective also implemented in Abrahamic perspective. This is actually very central when we look to Abraham stories. It's not only about beliefs, but it's also about values on carry across the generation. most of the people today are the son of Abraham, the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, and it's carried across the generation through relationship, through the example. So in that sense, addressing interreligious tension is not only about dialogue at the top, but about strengthening the foundation. And yeah, I think that's a critical part. And also to mention in Southeast Asia, I see this is reflected culturally, I think. There's a strong instinct to preserve harmony, not because tension doesn't exist, but because the relationship are valued. In many parts of the world, yeah, we know we are going to some kind of conflict phase, but in Southeast Asia, it's more calm, and I think this is resonates with deeper ethical values also found in the Abrahamic tradition. And yeah, I think this is my answer about the education and religious tension.
No, I really enjoyed your answer. I specifically, I really liked that point about how there is a difference between traditions and education, but also the power of the family to be able to, positive and negative in terms of teaching people about prejudice, but also harmony. And hopefully there will be more harmony in the world as we educate them more and help them understand the importance of other religions. So thank you so much for those statements. That was beautiful.
That
Thank you.
was. And I liked what you said about youth, the rising generation, and um, what roles do youth have in addressing interreligious tensions?
Yeah, like I told you, I work at my part time. Also, I work for the Teodisi. I co-founded this institution to help the people understanding interreligious in Abrahamic. I don't only talk about the Islams. I don't only talk about the Christians. Also talk about the Torah and many more, etc. And beside that, I also uh, meet and create some space between the Abrahamic religious leaders in Southeast Asia. And we met some kind of a hub to explore about the Abrahamic and researching about the Abrahamic civilization in Southeast Asia itself. And yeah, this is what I do today in sense of the interfaith.
That is wonderful. Daffa, we have so enjoyed getting to know you and hearing the amazing work that you're doing there in Southeast Asia. Thank you so much for your insights and the things that we've learned today.
Thank you so much. But before I we close the podcast, can I mention something that quietly unique?
Of course, we would love to hear it.
So yeah, by my research in Abrahamics, especially in Southeast Asia, we found that one name may be like forgiven in history, the big history of interfaith. Uh, its name is Keturah. Have you ever heard about Keturah, Mariana and Stuart?
No.
Oh yeah. So Keturah is Abraham's wife. Like maybe in surface level, we only know Sarah and Hagar as the Abraham wives.
Oh, yes, Keturah. Yes, I do know who Keturah is. No, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, the Keturah in the Bible is sent to the east. When we see the geopolitics at the time, the MENA, Middle East and North Africa, where the Abrahams are born, is the east of MENA is Southeast Asia. So I want to maybe mention this perspective about the Keturah. So Keturah is often less discussed in a part of Abraham's story, but I see her as representing the continuation and diffusion of Abrahamic values beyond their central narratives. Through her, the lineage doesn't remain confined, but it moves outward, especially toward to the east, like I told you. And I interpret this not only a physical movement, but as a symbolic one. The moral values can travel, adapt, and become embedded in different culture without always being formalized as a doctrine. In that sense, Ketura represent how values can live quietly, not through institution, but through culture. And this becomes very relevant when we look in Southeast Asia. The region is incredibly diverse. Today's in Indonesia, we uh, in the middle of Nyepi. Nyepi is in Hinduism cultural. Tomorrow is Eid Mubarak, is Muslim. So it's very diverse here in Southeast Asia. Yet many societies emphasize harmony, avoiding open conflict, and preserving relationship. There are just not social habits, but deeply embedded in cultural instinct. And I sometimes reflect on whether this instinct resonates with deeper moral values also present in Abrahamic tradition, restraint, hospitality, respect, and a strong emphasis on preserving life. So Southeast Asia, in a way, can be seen as a living example of how difference can be held together through an underlying ethical fabric. And that's where the interfaith dialogue shifts from something we do occasionally into something that is already being lived quietly and relationally. So when we bring Abrahamic narrative into interfaith space, the goal is not to make everyone agree, it's to introduce sense of inheritance that we are part of broader moral story, even we express in a differently. And when people begin to see themselves that way, the fact dialogue changes. It becomes less about negotiation and more about recognition, less about managing a difference and more about carrying shared responsibility forward. And that's what allows it to become more cultural values, not just response to conflict. Because culture is not built through formal dialogue alone, it's built through repeat ways of seeing, relating, and acting. So if narratives shift, the culture will eventually follow. And today's context, where we see increasing polarization and fragmentation, this shift is not just helpful, but I think it's necessary because it's offer different way of imaging coexistence and not as something fragile that needs constant management, but as something grounded and share a moral condition. I think that's my. Sorry, it's maybe it's long.
No, that was wonderful, and realize you expressed so beautifully, I think, what Interfaith 20 is trying to do, that we are trying to change the culture of the world in terms of bringing all these disparate views and bringing them together into an interfaith dialogue, to be able to talk and to be able to really understand that we are much more alike than we are different, and to be, to bring together those things that we all believe in and make sure that those become the world culture, right? I mean, that was so beautifully said that you just went through. So I really enjoyed that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Thank you so much, Stuart.
Yes. Thank you for joining our show today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast.
The podcast provides information and discussions on the G20 Interfaith Forum, but the views expressed are those of the individuals involved and not necessarily the official stance of the forum.
The content is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice or expert recommendations. Listeners should exercise personal responsibility, seek professional guidance, and conduct further research when making decisions based on the podcast.
The information shared may not always reflect the most current developments, and external links or resources are provided for additional information but are not endorsed or controlled by the podcast.
By listening to the podcast, listeners acknowledge and accept these disclaimers. Please be aware that the content of this podcast may be subject to copyright. Unauthorized copy, distribution, and reproduction of any part of the podcast is prohibited.